Good evening, everyone. My name is Paul Young. I'm doing a series of videos. This particular video likely will be pretty short because I'm just going to keep to the key points of manufacturing because I want to drive more discussions back to kind of sweep some of these false accusations that Thomas Mulcair and Justin Trudeau are making in terms of statement, and especially as it supports the Conservative Party's policy as it relates to manufacturing. So this particular presentation is going to be focused on high-level views of GDP. It'll look at manufacturer sales in Canada. It'll talk about issues facing manufacturing. It'll talk about government policy. I'll even pull in some statements from Jason Myers, who's the part of a not-for-profit group or a support for the Canadian Manufacturer Association. So he works with his constituencies in terms of looking at government policies to better support his constituencies he supports, and I'll bring his comments into play. So the very first thing I want to talk about that is some misnomers here. What I've done is, for this particular graph, I've looked from GDP growth just for the first 6 months. I didn't go into previous years or anything, but I wanted to give you an understanding of manufacturing's role in Canada in general. Now, our GDP is close to $2 trillion in essence. About 10.5% to close to 11% of our GDP is manufacturing. Now, let's take a step back there. Manufacturing has evolved over the last 30-40 years because there's a lot of changes that have happened. Globalization has driven it, and I'll get into more specific details when we get into policy, but we still have a manufacturing base here. The difference is it's become a little bit more difference between about the mid-90s to now, is the manufacturing base here is not so much small manufacturers, because small manufacturers only account for about 1/3 of all manufacturers in Canada, and typically small ones are typically little metal fabrication shops or niche manufacturers, because in essence, with the way supply chain management works now, is the large corporations are having more dependencies on companies to build part of the more of the product itself. So I'll take a look at automotive just quickly, and it highlights it because automotive is a key area of in terms of the voting cycles in Ontario, especially in Windsor, Ontario, Kitchener, Hamilton area, right? So let me just talk quickly about that. In automotive's case, since the mid-90s, there's been more things go what we call as building components. So the automotive manufacturers like GM, Chrysler, Toyota, and all them basically want manufacturers to build either the drivetrain, build the bodies, and then all these manufacturers like Toyota will do is assemble. That's a big change. In the past, it used to be a lot of these manufacturers like GM and Chrysler used to build a lot of products themselves, but now what they're trying to do is try to get more leverage or more control over the cost within the part structures to better leverage that. And they're not the only one that's doing that. The other thing that's come into play, there's more advanced manufacturing, whether that's laser welding, whether that's robotic welding, whether that's basically just automation in general in terms of how we do things. So we've removed more and more of the manual intervention in that, and I'll get into those policies as well. But the key aspect I want to drive here is manufacturing still critical. This is just gives you an example of it, because constantly you always hear from the left that manufacturing, that Harper has all his eggs in one basket. Well, manufacturing sales on average are close to 623 billion a year. And so that being said, the oil accounts for petroleum products related, and that's petrochemical stuff, accounts for about 1/6 or 1/7 of all manufacturing. So how is that Harper has all his eggs in one basket? He doesn't. He has a very diversified policies that deal with all aspects of this, and that's why I wanted to show you this, because different aspects in here will drive different policies and different impacts. That manufacturing hotbed is still Quebec and Ontario. However, you do have manufacturing throughout the country, whether that's in BC, whether it's in Alberta, whether it's in Saskatchewan. So that being said, it's very critical not to just to look at one segment of manufacturing, but looking at the complete aspect of all aspects of manufacturing. The NDP never looks at all angles of manufacturing because their party roots go back to unions, and unions will fight productivity improvements. Because why? Because productivity usually means automation. Automation usually means less union jobs. So why would you allow more productivity improvements if it means union jobs will disappear? So how is Thomas Mulcair going to move forward with manufacturing when the power base he has is unions? Isn't he going to be fought a little bit more in productivity? And that drives some of the way manufacturing competitiveness happens in this country. This basically gives you a high-level view, and what I try to do with this particular graph is just try to illustrate that since 2015 average versus the average for 2014, where are we seeing the downturns? Okay, well, if you look at transportation has started to rebound, and transportation's got good aspects to that. And transportation includes buses. We make buses out in Manitoba. It also includes automotive production. We're still producing vehicles, whether that's Toyota, Honda, Chrysler, GM, or Ford. We still make vehicles in this country. Food manufacturing. We're a huge food manufacturing. That's where you start seeing small, medium-sized food manufacturers, because we're pretty solid in that. Whether it's cheese, dairy, or other products, we make them pretty good. We've got forestry, which basically is another area. That's your lumber mills. Okay, and what's driving that? Well, housing starts. Housing starts are very high, both Canada and the US. That's driving that. If you see primary metals in that's again, along with the oil, is being driven by commodity prices. Now, Stephen Harper has no control over commodity prices. Commodity prices are dictated by either OPEC, that's oil, or they're dictated by the mercantile exchanges in terms of things. So Harper has put emphasis on oil and gas, and that's true, but that's not the only area he's done. If you look at his other policies, and in terms of innovation, he's got an aerospace fund, he's got a food processing fund, he's got advanced manufacturing, so he has all that. The key is how do you leverage those programs on an integrated strategy as part of the overall growing of an economy. You'll never hear those kind of details, and those are the questions you should be asking Thomas Mulcair or Justin Trudeau. Key quotes. Okay, there's been a misnomer that basically Harper does not like manufacturing. Well, here's a couple quotes here. Jason Myers has basically said that Harper's policies of low on corporate taxes has helped. He's also talked about the manufacturing accelerated depreciation, which has helped. He's also talked about trade and investment deals, which has helped. But what is interesting here in one of the quotes here is that Justin Trudeau calls out the oil and gas sector just like Thomas Mulcair does. Yet Thomas Mulcair and Justin Trudeau are fighting for votes in Ontario Rich. But yet they want to shut down or make it difficult for the oil sands or oil development to happen in Canada. Well, oil sands in Canada actually helps Ontario's manufacturers to a tune of about $5 billion a year. So if you want to shut down or make it difficult for oil expansion to happen in Alberta, then you're hurting Ontario, which in turn hurts the federal government, because that's taxation money you're getting it. And if you've got limited taxation money, don't you want to leverage those taxation dollars? But that's not the statement you're hearing from the NDP or Liberal Party. They're too busy saying Harper's plan isn't working. Well, what is their plan? Their plan is to hammer sectors that will drive other sectors down. Let's talk about key drivers. If you look at Manufacturing 101 and you look at a process, it's hydro, it's labor, it's raw materials, overhead, and transportation. Okay, now you constantly hear the NDP talk about this $300,000 job loss, and they pin it all onto Harper's policies. Well, Harper has no control over hydro rates. That's a provincial jurisdiction. Labor rates, okay, can have some influence based on the currency, but in a lot of cases it's not as heavy as other issues. Okay, advanced manufacturing's come into play, which isn't discussed by Mulcair or Trudeau. We also talk about exports and the idea that the Canadians have more access to markets outside of Canada, including beyond the US. That's a key area. Internal trade barriers. It's easier to trade with the US than it is within Canada. Trade barriers are provincial jurisdiction, but need to be cleared up. It's very easy to say 300,000 jobs are all Harper's fault. Why? Because you can shoot the messenger. However, you can throw all the money you want in innovation funds like Mulcair wants to do, or Trudeau wants to say, oh, Kathleen Wynne's a wonderful premier, I'll just give her more money. But the issue is if you do not make Ontario or the rest of the provinces more competitive, then you will be losing out to investment. Okay? In Ontario's case, they've done everything possible to drive business out, whether it's a new policy for cap and trade, whether it's a new pension plan. But you don't hear that discussed because those are provincial matters. So what's Mulcair and Trudeau going to do? Just give more money to subsidize those burdens of costs? That's the questions you should be asking yourself, because the only one that seems to step up for business and to support an economy is Stephen Harper. So let's talk about policies here now. And I only highlighted the big five here, right? Corporate taxation. Now, let's talk with Mulcair here. He's backpedaled. Initially, he said he'd want competitive rates with the OECD, which is a group of development countries, right? But in Canada's case, they're ranked low end of that, so he backpedaled. Now he's saying that he would gradually phase in corporate taxes back up to 17.5%. Now, what he's saying in this particular example, he is saying that for medium to large companies, now he's backpedaled a little bit on medium, but I'm not sure how you can make a differentiation between the medium to large company under the Income Tax Act. It's very difficult because we have specific tax policies like the small business deduction that go into certain companies and thresholds. So he's been unclear where he will cut that break, so that'd be a question I'd ask where he wants that. The second thing is small manufacturers only account for 1/3 of all manufacturing in Canada. So if you decide to reduce the small business taxes, you're only helping 1/3 of manufacturers. And yet he says, I support manufacturing. You will have a manufacturer leader in Ottawa. How? When basically he's inconsistent with his corporate tax policies. Second thing is, Mulcair supports CPP enhancement. CPP enhancement's a payroll tax. So any business that's going to enhance CPP would have to pass that cost on to people. How is that helping business? Trudeau wants to do the same thing. Harper will keep a look at CPP and align it, but he's not going to hike it because there's so many options between tax-free savings accounts to RSPs so that there's no need to kind of enhance it. Plus, it's this idea that people aren't saving is not necessarily true. And I would encourage you to go do a search on the C.D. Howell Institute. They did a survey on how much people are saving. They said it's not an issue. The second thing is this is more about having access to government money for the NDP and Trudeau to pay down their plans, to support their plans through using pension funds to balance their approach to infrastructure. Cap and trade. Cap and trade will hit manufacturing hard, especially raw materials, transportation, and all that. That cost gets passed on. Both Trudeau and Mulcair support that. Innovation funds. Mulcair has never talked about the existing funds, but he has said he'll look at aerospace and he'll look at automotive. Now again, at the time I did this video, it's September 13th, so he may change a little bit around then. Trudeau has made no commitment on any innovation fund. My guess is he'll just keep what Harper's does and then rebrand them as liberal. Harper will continue to look at different programs to support R&D, to support manufacturing. Skills trades. Both the NDP and Liberal have been incoherent with their statements. But you can bet your dollar that both of them, but more so with Mulcair, he'll work directly with Unifor, the other unions, to basically come up with training programs. And he might even create his own federal group called the new agency called Skills Trades Agencies or something like that, and have it all populated with unions. I wouldn't put it by that guy. So that's questions you need to ask. Trade and investment. Mulcair is great at talking about balance of payments and GDP deficit, export deficits, but what he's not good at is talking about solutions, okay? Because he likes to pander on emotion. This guy couldn't come up with a solution if his life depended on it, if you're really talking about anything to do trade with export, because it would mean looking at all aspects of the economy, and he doesn't have the depth or breadth to kind of have those conversations. But he can go out and basically say 300,000 jobs are all Harper's fault, and yet if you go out and do a Google search and do Gerald Butts and 300,000 manufacturing job, you'll see that a lot of that's aligned to bad provincial policies. The Liberal Party, if you look at their history, is typically goes after, basically runs on conservative parties. In the 90s, that's what Paul Martin and John Chrétien did with economic policies and tax. So I don't see any different than if Trudeau were to become the next Prime Minister, that he doesn't ride those policies. Harper will continue to make strategic choices in investment and trade deals to help Canadian companies compete both domestically and globally. That kind of wraps up manufacturing. I wanted to make it quite clear that the trade unions are really pushing to any but Harper. There's a couple reasons why they're doing that. They're disappointed with one of the bills that's out there that wants more transparency on union money and how that union money is being spent. So the unions don't want to disclose that. Yes, you'll get union members telling you that, you know what, that information's available. Yes, but what I've found out from talking to people, unions not very helpful of disclosing those financial statements. So there's a lot of it about transparency. Second thing is, they always complain about trade and investment deals. The issue is unless you have trade and investment deals, you can't move your economy forward. Okay, because Canada is a population of 35 million people. Without trade and exports, you're never going to be able to get that revenue back to support these lovely social programs that Mr. Mulcair likes, like his daycare, or Mr. Trudeau likes his green energy stuff. But that's fine, because these people are pandering for votes. But what you need to do as people, you need to go ask tough questions of these people. Is if you're being employed in manufacturing, you may want to ask, what is these policies of taxation and cap and trade going to impact on my employer? Is he going to be basically forced to close, downsize, or what? How's that going to impact me? And if that's the case, if you claw back investment, or companies claw back the size of their organization, what's that going to do in terms of growing the economy? It's not. But these are the questions that you need to ask of your elected officials as well as part of the campaigns. I targeted this specifically for two reasons. One is I'm not sure that the opposition parties are clear with their understanding of manufacturing. Secondly, I believe in manufacturing. I'm a professional accountant by trade. I've worked with manufacturers for a better part of 25 years. I know what it takes to compete. Companies can compete if things are fairly done. What they can't compete with is a multitude of policies and the threat of new policies. Businesses can adapt to anything because they've done it for years, whether it's a rising dollar or a low dollar. However, they can't adapt if they've got 10 or 11 other things that are being hammered out too that impact their input cost. So that's factors you need to kind of think of in general. And that's why I did this videos, because I'm very passionate about my country, but I'm also passionate about the message being said. I do not like things when low facts are put out by Thomas Mulcair or Justin Trudeau to pander for votes. I had hoped that throughout all these videos, as well as reading some of the blogs, that people would be smarter, be asking questions. But there seems to be a struggle about what they support. And maybe that's just because they have their own beliefs and stuff. But I was hoping at some point with all these videos that some of you would like to go out and ask tough questions. How are these governments, especially the NDP and Liberal Party, who have in their platform higher taxation, really going to help me? That's the questions you need to ask. Put all the rhetoric beside and ask yourself, who's helped the middle class? Who's done something for you? You can go out and watch my other videos, because I've been very coherent and very succinct in terms of the approach. Thank you so much.